Alright, we're back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, we're right back on to the Terrion Arnold case. Now, admittedly, I am a little late by a few days, but there was actually a pretrial hearing for Terrion Arnold in this situation. Now, of course, going back to the last video, as we stated, and as other sources have gone through, he is still facing 8 charges, 4 counts of armed robbery, including one with conspiracy to commit it, and also 4 counts of kidnapping, with one conspiracy charge baked into that as well, forcing him into a scenario where he could face life in prison if he is found guilty on pretty much any of those charges at all. And, considering where Terrion Arnold had come from, considering all that we outlined, because the facts are in the case that he was actually robbed. A lot of the things after that have been used as evidence. They don't paint the best picture, especially when you talk about a potential live stream that he was a part of. Importantly, he was not in the house at the time of the crimes outlined in the documentation throughout the case, where 3 victims who had no relation to his robbery at all on February 1st were basically tortured and interrogated in a, honestly, guerrilla-like style, to be honest with you. That kind of warfare, where you typically see these kinds of things go down amongst different soldiers. And you had people allegedly in his crew, including a childhood friend of his in Boakai Hilton, I believe, act on it and give out directions. These are the things that were alleged to happen. And of course, there is no place for trying to act beyond the law in a situation like that. You feel for Terrion Arnold in the case that, hey, you're losing those kinds of materials. The money itself is obviously a lot. They amounted it to $250,000 worth of lost property and stolen property. And this was actually reported to the Tampa Police Department just a few hours before this alleged incident happened on February 4th. Potentially in the midnight even. Like, they did the right thing there, and you could understand how much panic might be going on in the mind from his standpoint, because that's generally how it is in any scenario where a person might be robbed of anything, whether or not they are in the area. But to take matters into your own hands in any kind of way was always going to be a huge risk. And no matter what avenue was taken here, your life was certainly going to be at some form of a risk. So that is where we stood up to the pretrial hearing. He was set, honestly, in that to have his sentencing prior to the trial determined. That's the entire logic behind a pretrial hearing. He could spend time in jail leading up to the case, or he could be given time out of the prison cell and bond out, potentially. So the choice would be up to the judge, and in it, both sides were able to present their case. Up to this point, with everything that we'd read, you honestly hear something like this, and it kind of lines up with how everything had been reported about how Arnold was viewed as a primary conspirator, with Hilton alongside him on his way to the house, allegedly giving out directions to Randazzo, Del Val, and the others in his crew at the time, and in the house with the 3 victims of this entire ordeal, giving out orders, trying to keep them there, and trying to keep them subdued through physical torture, again, literally, you're talking about beating them up, you're talking about pistol whipping them. Those were the examples that were used. So, like, I'm not even saying it to just sound crazy. This is literally what they are alleging happened. But they're viewing Arnold as the main factor in all of this. And, it sounds convincing enough when you first hear of the case. Hey, this guy got robbed, and he is in a scramble right now. A 23-year-old just trying to spend time and hang out with his friends, pretty much. His entire crew was staying in the Airbnb where the initial robbery happened on February 1st. So you're chilling there, you're thinking that everything is safe and sound on your property at the time, even if it is rented out. And you come back home to see that something was afoot. And one way or another, without me even knowing it, my stuff was stolen from me? No, I can't accept that in a way. Like, he, again, did the legal thing by, sending that information over and reporting it to the police. But hearing that and, recognizing that you can't even control a situation like that, recognizing that you had no say in what happened at all, you had no ability to even defend your property and defend yourself in that moment, who would blame him thinking like this? Who would blame him if he were to try to seek revenge on those who did it? And that's kind of the idea that they're running with. He had an understanding that he simply wanted to get his stuff back. And the idea, from his standpoint, would be to execute that immediately. Take his items back and potentially do some physical damage, at the very least, to the victims that he thought were involved in it. Now, as this quote from A to Z Sports states, quote, "The states' theory is strictly based on the idea that it was Arnold who set the plan in motion, and while he may not have quarterbacked the plan once it was underway, it was Arnold who went to his friends to state that he believed he knew who had robbed his Airbnb and suggests bringing those people to a place where they could confront them." End quote. Now again, in theory, that sounds convincing enough. Is there a motive? Sure. Maybe the intent was to hurt these people. But at the very least, hey, I understand who did it, so let's go give them a taste of their own medicine. Let's antagonize them. And let's see if I can recuperate some of those items. And if they don't have my items, hey, let's get back at them and let me take on some of their own property. Let me assume control of that. So this could be a power play from that respect. And that's kind of how the state is approaching it. On the one end, you could see where they'd be coming from in a situation like this. And given also that a couple people in his crew up to this point had already been charged with the felonies, and they're already set to face like years in state prison as well, there's a strong possibility also, as some people have outlined, that could also influence things, depending on what it was that these people in particular have told prosecutors. I have no way of knowing what exactly might have been said right now, but that is something to take into consideration. And that played into a different point that we explained in the previous video. Because as they stated through numerous sources, it's not like, these other people in his crew are sure to distance him from everything. they may try to distance themselves when they look at the potential sentencing laid out in front of their own eyes for their specific involvement in these alleged crimes. And they could try to use that against him. Try to come up with a statement that further incriminates a primary conspirator, which they still believe is Arnold, to lessen their sentence. That is possible. And, when you are in a situation like this, considering the amount of money that Terrion Arnold already had made in his very short NFL career up to this point, it's not something that you can completely dismiss. You have to, do whatever you will with it. Whether it's in the back of your mind or you just simply take it with a grain of salt at this point. You can't overlook that at all. You've seen it in other court cases, generally speaking, with regular people, all the time. And it is in this situation where the judge, once both sides were able to present their cases, because of course, on the other end, for his defense, he's stating that, hey, he had no idea that it would get to that point. He did not truly commit himself to, being involved in that manner to kind of take vengeance on these people who he believed had robbed him. They're saying, on part of him, representation has consistently kept up the notion that he did not do these things at all, and that he was not criminally involved. They sat for a while on this and tried to present both of their arguments in the best ways they could, working from a legal standpoint, right? However, once it was set in stone, the decision would come closer to being made. And it is at that point where you kind of heard from the judge a little bit. Because, granted, with some of the other cases that I've dealt with in this regard, it's like you have to really make sure that your arguments are sound. If there is any fault found in your statement, in any piece of your evidence at all, the judge will clearly make it known. And it is in those situations where it can literally change the course of an entire case. Look no further than what happened with Sharon Moore earlier in the year. One small missed detail was the difference between him potentially serving jail time for his alleged crime and going free on probation, right? So you have to genuinely make sure that everything you are trying to present is lined up chronologically in a reasonable order with logical sense being made of every point. And it is in this time where the judge was able to find a fault. Mainly with him kind of turning the idea and the theory the state and the prosecutors are using for their side of the case here against them. According to this quote, the judge said that he considers the case serious in the first quarter, but due to the evidence in the case, said that the standard for keeping Arnold in jail was not met. One of the key factors is that Arnold was not physically in the location where the crime he is charged for occurred. And from the judge himself, I understand the prosecution's argument regarding motive. I understand everything and I find there's probable cause, the judge said. I'm giving him a tremendous benefit, I believe, and not putting the ankle monitor that would interfere with his ability to earn a living, which I want him to continue to be able to do. He's in a unique situation. We don't have a lot of defendants with that type of job. End quote. In conjunction with that, in terms of the probable cause, he said the burden is higher than the probable cause. End quote. The burden is higher than the probable cause. Just hang on that for a second. Because the same idea of Terrion Arnold being the primary conspirator here has its own faults when you look at it from the human perspective. And this is what the judge is getting at. This is what some people are also saying in Terrion Arnold's case. That maybe he was again hurt naturally by the fact that he was robbed. He truly had no idea what had happened and wanted to, in some way, figure out, honestly, how to move forward from the situation. People subscribing to this notion, and the way that the judge frames it, is that there is also a possibility that if some of these other things about his friends potentially being involved in it aren't true, if you don't subscribe to that, then seeing Arnold in that state might have compelled some of his friends instead to rope him into this plan to get back at these people. And potentially with a mixture of emotions. Reluctance at what could happen, and even joining into the idea in the first place. And also a bit of, I guess, hope in a way to make sure that everything with he and his crew would line up and that they could retrieve the items in due time. Arnold joined at the behest of other people in the crew, and some are directly pointing the finger at Hilton as the conspirator instead, stringing Arnold along for the ride, rather than having Arnold drive the proverbial ship here. Arnold, if we're sticking to this quote and what the judge is saying, potentially did not know the full extent to which this would have ended up going. He was simply trying to recover all of his stolen items. And he had no idea that it would get to such a criminally illegal state. That's what the argument on the judge's behalf is. That yes, there is a motive, but the true weight of what Arnold might have been carrying in that moment has yet to be determined right now. And if they can hash that out, if we can get more detail on that, the judge believes that that holds more weight in this case right now than whatever probable cause the prosecutors might be trying to establish. And that means a lot. To say that Arnold was merely involved just to potentially assist his friends and his crew is totally different than saying he was the brains of the operation. That he was the head honcho in this alleged armed robbery and kidnapping aspect. Those are two totally different things. that doesn't even mean that Terrion Arnold would be right in any case. It still is not a great look to try to take matters into your own hands in any way with something of this magnitude, because it should be it should be assumed by the authorities instead. You genuinely don't know what can happen in cases like this. To try to get revenge is a sort of vigilante. And that is kind of the premise here that people would still, believe. But to say that Arnold may not have been the voice that led the entire crew to conduct themselves in this way throughout this time, it changes up things completely. As this quote continues to say in regards to this per Yahoo Sports, the prosecution's argument relied heavily on the testimony of two co-defendants facing life in prison, as I said, who claimed Arnold was involved in the alleged activities. The judge said there was not enough evidence that Arnold was present during the alleged crimes. The judge added that there was nothing on Arnold's phone, social media, or his text that connected Arnold with the alleged crimes at a level where keeping him in jail was the right path. End quote. So, that's another point as well. Not only is there a potential burden element on Arnold's end that could be preventing them from completely laying down the law and giving him the most severe penalty prior to the trial, but they also have a lack of true evidence working against him. Now again, stuff like the live stream could be very damning if they get hold of that. But with what they presented at the time on Monday in this case, they didn't have much to offer outside of this testimony from these two co-defendants, rather than the hard evidence you would need to actually move a judge and convince a judge or a justice for this case to lean one way or the other. They didn't have enough. Like it was detailed in the documentation, Arnold was not there in person. At least it does not show that Arnold was there in person. In fact, they say that he ended up being there after all of these alleged crimes had gone down, and at least got there when everything stopped, as these people were then scared away and before they called the police at that time, as documentation would say. And on his phone as well, because they can get access to that. And, aside from the live stream, they didn't have anything on him in regards to texts that might have alluded to something happening, in regards to calls that might have alluded to something happening, in regards to social media posts about it. Because those could be good pieces of evidence, but if you don't have anything of that sort, it just doesn't really give you a clear-cut picture of what you are relaying as your own side of the potential truth here. It's just hard to really state that as fact when you don't have much to, supply with here. So, in this case, with all of that being taken into account, the judge would then proceed to make his decision, where Terrion Arnold, per him, would be given a $1 million bond. As high as that sounds, it means that he will not have to serve jail time in the pretrial process, that he'll be out with a paparazzi monitor rather than an ankle monitor during this time before the trial kicks off. Now, a paparazzi monitor sounds crazy as hell, but essentially the way that the judge was framing it throughout these quotes is that any movement that he has out of a certain area in beyond specific boundary lines, it will be tracked. Social media will pick up on it. Broadcast media like ESPN will pick up on it, as he said. They will figure out where he is at any one point of time. And as this bond is set, he'll have to follow all the conditions. If he doesn't, they'll find a way to bring him right back because he'll be tracked down. They also, from that standpoint, because he is an NFL player who would have a huge risk in potentially playing for a team while having a full-fledged trial looming over your head, he was still eligible for practices at this time. So they are stating to themselves that, again, with this unique circumstance, with him being a player, trying to re-up and prepare for the NFL season, they found it best to suggest that allowing him that space to do that work was also allowed and permitted in the context of this particular bond. So that would, from that standpoint, be a huge win from Terrion Arnold, you could say, in this situation. You don't have to serve jail time at all, and you still, for the time being, get to do your job. Get to make a living, as the judge said. Yet, like I mentioned, it is a huge risk and potentially a PR nightmare for some people to have to handle. By suggesting that you are technically out on the field now, the trial could start at any point. And we'd have to go through as a team, as a front office, essentially beckoning the most you'd have to have so much insurance for Terrion Arnold just as a contingency plan, and summon a lot of energy around trying to navigate this case step by step at each and every single turn. He'd have to show up for all the hearings. He'd have to show up for all of the specific dates on the trial when it does kick off. He'd have to be there for other meetings with his lawyer. And you still would have to find a way to help him get acclimated to a team, to help him effectively train and stay on the right routine and regimen throughout the year. And you'd have to make sure that he truly recognizes the playbook and meshes with his teammates, and that sounds like a lot because it is. Those are all things the teams would have to weigh with taking on Terrion Arnold. The Lions, for what it's worth, decided that would not suffice for them because they cut him on the same day, just mere hours after the bond announcement came out from the presser from the courts. The Lions released him. Now, again, this is just like far greater than a football only thing. So I'll be brief from that perspective, but it does matter. The main thing you need to know about it is that it does cost the Lions still. It's not like it's an outright suspension. No, they are actively releasing him while he is in the middle of a legal battle. And that is in terms of the guarantees, they could have also voided them if there was a forfeitable breach, per the new NFL CBA. Per that, for example, according to Article 4, Section 9, via USA Today, it states that a forfeitable breach is any player who willfully fails to report, practice, or play with the result that the player's ability to fully participate and contribute to the team is substantially undermined, or is unavailable to the team due to conduct by him that results in his incarceration, or is unavailable to the team due to a non-football injury that resulted from a material breach of paragraph 3 of his NFL player contract, or voluntarily retires, may be required to forfeit signing bonus, roster bonus, option bonus, and or reporting bonus and other salary for each league year in which a forfeitable breach occurs. And pretty much from that standpoint, the Lions still ended up costing themselves, quite frankly, in eating the bill. Incarceration would have suggested, frankly, that he actually faced jail time. And I mean, it's saying here that, for example, Arnold wouldn't have gotten any guaranteed money protected on his contract that would have kept him there. With that not being the case, well, technically, I guess you could say it is. But nevertheless, having that noise and that distraction surround you, it would be too much for the Lions to handle. Especially with the turnaround that they are attempting in this upcoming season after what was a pretty lackluster year. That aside, there are other teams potentially looking for Terrion Arnold right now. He is technically a free agent and he can still join another roster. It's just, do they want to surround themselves with that? Is it worth the risk for them to take a chance on a young player who is still trying to prove themselves, honestly, on the field, and potentially get a young 23-year-old rising star at the cornerback position? Do you take a risk with that while knowing that at any moment he is going to have to face the court and participate in this trial, being on the defense, with these alleged crimes looming over his head? It's just, that is something that a lot of people are going to have to go soul searching for as this gets underway, because there's a lot more to it. Both sides are going to have to get back to the drawing board and truly muster up convincing evidence and genuine evidence that can benefit their arguments in the court of law. That's how it has to be. It's never a good look when a judge says that it does not compute with the case at all, the little evidence that they did have. So they need more. Can they find more? Will they be able to find more? We'll have to figure that out over the next few months. For now, it's hit a bit of a pause as they continue to sort this stuff out. But what we know right now is that Terrion Arnold, at the very least, is out on bond. And he'll be monitored wherever he goes. He's restricted to a few places. So, going outside those limits could cause problems in regards to everything pre-trial, which would also very much hurt Terrion Arnold in this case. Genuinely, there's no way of knowing what to think right now, because we genuinely don't have all of the facts. But even the mere idea of having Terrion Arnold be involved in this entire ordeal simply by association changes up the entire flow of their argument, the entire flow of the case completely, from the standpoint of him being the leading man and the leader of this attack and siege on these victims that he thought wronged him by robbing his house on February 1st. I repeat that these victims, again, as stated across several sources, were found to have no involvement with that initial robbery of Terrion Arnold. And, no matter what direction this case ends up going, whether they find, Terrion Arnold or even the other people in the crew guilty on all or even one of their charges at any one point in time, depending on how they frame the case, you still have to keep your mind attuned to those three people. Because no matter what happens here, not only are general people looking for justice, but they would be themselves at this point, regardless of what direction this takes. Because again, innocent people with no involvement at all in any of the events outlined in this case were beaten senseless randomly because of the thoughts of another individual and the direct actions of potential others. So we'll see how everything goes, but for now, that'll do it for this one. Could have been a lot shorter, I will admit. But again, just trying to be as fair as possible. Trying to, figure out all sides here. And really just, in a way, yearning for more evidence to come out. Because you want to be as sure as possible when you are talking about something as potentially severe as those sentences. Like, when you're going for something like that, you have to make sure that you are on point. You cannot miss any fundamental step in that preparation for a case of this magnitude. Because if you're truly trying to win it, whether you're trying to get the charges off or whether you're trying to make them stick for a different person, it can't happen unless you are truly able to speak clearly and honestly with reason about your client. At least if you're the defense. Prosecution as well. You'll have moments in there where, okay, if a person is genuinely guilty, you don't want to make it seem like that. But again, can you truly present a good case? That's always the question in any law setting. And when, this is all said and done, we'll be able to figure out the full extent, eventually, of everyone's involvement just so many different lives wrapped up into this situation. A childhood friend, a potential girlfriend, as some documents have stated as well, and others. None over the age of 23, I believe. All of them very young, with potentially bright futures ahead of them, getting themselves wrapped up in something like this. It's crushing, to say the least. But hopefully we're able to truly figure out what has happened. Peace.